the more that you can speak to a reader and say, I'm inviting you to a bigger engagement. I'm inviting you to invest emotionally in this in in a more substantive way. Whatever signals you can give, whether it's explicit in the packaging or in the blurb or the story, to just make sure that they want to come along with that ride and that they're available to you to do that emotionally. That's a major asset because I don't think that readers necessarily don't like cliffhangers. It's they don't like them if they're not prepared or ready to go along with you for that ride.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Carrington-Russell, an Amazon Top 25 best-selling author known for writing kick-butt heroines and delicious men in dark romantic worlds. And if you're new here, then welcome. At BookTalk, we're dedicated to interviewing fellow authors and professionals within the publishing industry in hopes to give you inspiration, resources, and advice on how to level up in your writing career. And I have a very special guest for you today. We are talking to a USA Today and Wall Street Journal best-selling author known for writing steamy and emotional romance. We are talking to the one and only Piper Lawson. How are you today?
Oh, thanks, Kaya. I'm really well. How are you?
I am so much better now that you're on. I am so excited to dive into your 10 plus year journey so far. I'm sure it has been a wild ride for you.
It's been interesting. I mean, you probably know some of that being of the same vintage as me, but it's starting to be at the point where uh, I feel like I'm not quite a dinosaur, but maybe one of those prehistoric birds that was just coming off one of the later dinosaur periods. I've been around a minute. So when you start to think about publishing in eras, not just Taylor Swift eras, you realize that you have been around a few times.
You absolutely have, and it's interesting the resources and the information you gain, and then how irrelevant it becomes so quickly. But I would love for you to take me back to the start of the journey. Let's go down memory lane and explain to me how it was publishing the first book and what that experience was like for you.
Sure. Well, I'll start by saying I have always been a reader. Probably most of us have, starting as a child. I read everything from Stephen King to Nora Roberts, maybe not as a little child, but everything in between. You know, library was my happy place. My first power trip was getting an adult library card so I could take out 7 books instead of 3. All of these usual, fodders for author things, but I never took creative writing in school. It was something that I love to do in my spare time, make up stories. I would illustrate them too, but this wasn't ever a path that I had planned on going down. In 2013, I think it was, I read a Cosmopolitan article. So I was probably the target audience for Cosmopolitan back then, with an excerpt of Ilsa Madden Mill's Very Bad Things, which was my first like gateway into indie romance, because at that time you could have access to some of those publications as an indie, and it just blew me away. I read the excerpt, I went and read the book. I fell down a huge rabbit hole reading mostly on Apple Books at that time with like Elsa Madden Mills and Samantha Young and all of these amazing people. They had their free chart, so you could just devour any of these first books in series and then keep reading right on through. And it just blew my mind that you could write that not only substantively what it was, but the emotion and the voice and like the POV, the closeness. That's not probably not the words I would have used then, but there was just this visceral reaction I had to it. And I thought, that's really cool. I love reading this. And after reading a couple hundred probably of those books, I thought, I would love to try writing something like this. And so I did write my first book in, let me think, fall 2014. It took about 6 weeks. I don't think I've ever written one that fast since. There's always that first one. I think you have ideas of what needs to go in it and how you want to feel. So that one kind of poured out of me, and I didn't know, for better or for worse, what I should do or shouldn't do or could or couldn't do. And you probably remember that blessing and a curse at that time was that there weren't so many resources for how to start publishing as an independent author, but that just kind of meant you could fumble around and do your best and stick something up on Amazon in a couple of hours once you were happy with it and then just see what happened. So I found an editor. It was actually one of Ilse's editors because I went to the back of her books and I thought I may as well start with somebody who edited a book that I love. And she was able to edit for me, and I got my first book up in I think it was spring of 2015.
Amazing. And when was the moment for you? What was the journey like when you noticed momentum started building from your books? Was it almost immediately, or was it a couple of books in? When was the moment for you that you were like, wow, I'm actually a real author?
I wish I could say it was the first book. I know there are people, maybe it was for you. There are people who say it was their first book. The first book was really me pushing a very beloved rock up a hill. The people that came into it and enjoyed it really enjoyed it, which I appreciate so much. But I would say it was probably 3 or 4 books into that series, which I will credit my past self for unknowingly making it a series at least. And that third or fourth book was when I started to feel like there was more momentum. There were readers that were coming back to it and people were asking about it. Even then, that would have been 2016 or so. And then I started a second series fall of 2016, I think, my play series. And the first book of that was the first one that I made enough back within a couple months to cover my expenses. And I tried doing some baby ads, and that brought in all new readers. And I thought, wow, there's people that are going to read this that I don't have to tap on the shoulder individually on Goodreads. That's so cool. And that was sort of the start of thinking, oh, this could be something that's a little bit bigger than it has been.
Yeah. And I always love being transparent on this show. And one thing that I want to say too is not everyone hits it off with the first book. In fact, for most people, that's not the case. I know for me, I started publishing in 2014. I was quite young and very naive to the publishing world, and as we all were. And it had highs and it had lows. And I carved my teeth on almost 30 books, and it's only probably the last 2 to 3 years that I've really been comfortable with where my publishing journey has led to regarding making money back and that success. And so I do like seeing this type of journey as well. And I want to share that. So then it's also normalized for a lot of people that it doesn't always happen immediately. I do, however, think that times have changed a lot more, in my opinion, a lot more money has to now be invested. And that's quite scary, especially when you're diving into it now. And I think it was kind of nice to have that naivety when we started in 2014 because as you said there wasn't as many resources. Now there's a lot of voices, there's a lot of opinions, there's so many different things happening, and I think it can be so overwhelming, especially when you're thinking of the social medias and all the marketing that really goes into it. I think by the sounds of it you and I went, "Oh, I love this. I wrote a book. Here, hit publish," and go, that's weird. I haven't turned into like a well-known famous author overnight. Like, what's happening? Okay, this is harder than I thought. But I think it's an exciting journey as well. And I'm kind of curious as to whether there were dips in the last 10 years for you, whether you really had moments of doubting yourself or messages or a conversation that you had to have with yourself to realign and remember why you're doing this in the first place.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good point that a career, if you want to go into it as a career or even just an engaged hobby, like being a writer is something that happens over time. It's not just a single snapshot. It's not just, the picture you take when you release a book. The first book is wonderful, but that only shows a very small part of it. And I wanted from probably my second book, I won't say my first book, but probably from my second book, I knew that this is something I wanted to do for a long time. What I didn't know was exactly what that would look like. I didn't know if it would be a career. Certainly, I hope that it would, but there are a lot of other factors that go into that, right? With the market and your audience, and are you producing the kinds of books that are going to sell? Do you know how to package them? Do you know how to market them? How does that change over time? And so, one thing that helped me when I did have lows, because there absolutely were. I've written, I want to say 7 or 8 series now, and they definitely haven't all been equally successful. So something that helped me a lot when I had something that didn't sell as well was just realigning and saying, I have another book to write. It's not a problem that this one didn't hit the way the last one did. It would be kind of weird if they all hit the same, right? It would be very strange to write the 30 plus books that you and I have written and think, "Oh, they're all going to be exactly received the same way by the same number of people and have the same ratings and engagement and everything else," right? So I try to be kind of gracious with myself that way and say, this didn't find its market the way that the last one did, but there are others in the future. And I think something that I've also found is reflecting on backlist, or catalog as I like to call it. Catalog is super important because some of my best-selling books are still from 2018, 2019, like my best-selling series, and they continue to sell really well for me. And I don't think of it as my 2024 books should sell better than my 2018 books. I just think there's more market out there. There are more readers out there who are going to connect to this kind of story and these kind of characters. And I'm always looking for them. And so when I take that, 30, 35 books, all of which did kind of differently in kind of different pockets of the market, I will prioritize which ones I want to, say, spend ad money on or push through engagement on social media. But I don't look at it either in the moment or after the fact as I should stop doing this, or this release let me down, or the readers didn't get it. I think it's just all part of that bigger publishing ecosystem, and when we take it on as indie authors, that's part of the deal, right? Is you are the publisher, you're the creator, and you're the marketer and everything in between, and just understanding that this is a business with lots of moving pieces, and giving yourself the grace to be those different things at different times.
And you've also done a lot of experimenting as well. You write multi-genre. So there is always a debate of stay in your lane, do one genre, that's what your readers know you for, and do it. And there is no right or wrong. Or write multiple genres, do what you do as a writer and what sings to your heart at the time. However, that can sometimes be more challenging to market as well because it's a completely different audience. So, how have you gone with that? What's some of the things that you remain consistent in when marketing throughout different types of genres? And you're just like, this is the hallmark, this is my blueprint, and this is what I found has worked for me majority of the time.
It's a great question because I'm still figuring it out, to be totally honest. And every time I'll write a book or a series, and then, a year later, I know how to market it. That's the thing. I have such admiration for a lot of my colleagues who can release a series and they know exactly how to talk about it, and they know exactly who it's for on release day or 3 months before. They know all of that. And to me, I don't always know what a series is going to be best presented as until I've seen readers engage with it for 6 months. But that said, I think with my books, and I would say you're being very kind in saying they're cross genre. I'd say maybe cross subgenre. I'm not as exotic as some people as far as really stepping out into broad categories of the market, but definitely within, say, new adult and contemporary romance, I've got rock stars and athletes and some different things there. What I'm finding works really well for me are things like strong heroines who are ambitious and have audacious goals that are, concrete and tend to be more external leaning. I really am drawn towards heroes who have a kind of public visibility that means they, by necessity, have a really private version of themselves and then a separate version for public consumption. It can look like contemporary billionaire, it can look like athlete, it can look like rock star, right? Like those are all different manifestations, or guises that allow you to write that kind of character. But I think having some of those emotional or psychological traits in common helps me to tap into something that I'm going to be excited to write and helps my readers follow along, even though I'm not maybe writing the exact same niche every time. I envy the people that can do that and that know enough to do that. I just can't focus quite that much.
100%. And I absolutely love this too, because I do think for those who do write multi-genre as well, that, whether even the covers look slightly different or the branding, there is always going to be some element that's always the same in the books. And I think it is as exactly as you've just explained, as you said, you like writing strong heroine, like people still know that there will be that slice of you and that integrity that you've always carried through your books. For example, I know with mine, even if I go from fantasy to dark romance, I know that I like to write really strong women, but honestly, a lot of them often lack in being vulnerable. And so I love doing that arc where vulnerability can be just as beautiful and just as strong, and sometimes even harder than being like upfront, confrontational, let's go. So I think once you also understand within yourself as a writer that those are the core messages that you're actually providing, and I think that comes with time as well, like writing multiple books, and you're like, okay, these are the characters that I like because this just fuels my soul, and I feel like it has a really nice subliminal message under it. I think that's when you really have a better understanding of who you are and what you represent as well. Because as authors, we do have a platform and we have a responsibility to that as well. And I think it's incredible that we can just share it through so many different stories. One thing that you are super passionate about is writing those emotions and those cliffhangers. And I would love to know what advice you have for authors because some people can be quite scared about writing cliffhangers because sometimes it's not well received, but other times people love it. So, what advice do you have?
I so I started writing cliffhangers in 2018. It definitely wasn't my first books, but I think it came out of a couple things for me that were very practical. So one was that it takes me a while to really get to know my characters at like months when I'm writing a book. It can take me till the end of a whole book to get to know my characters. And by that point, I love them and I just want to spend more time with them. So partly for me, it came out of this realization that once I start to really love them, I have to let them go. And that just didn't feel like a good time. That said, I think there's a very pragmatic consideration when you're thinking about the length of your story that there are genre expectations like in a new adult or contemporary or maybe mafia or darker romance like you're writing. You're probably looking at something that's 70, 80, 90,000 words, maybe a little higher, lower. Fantasy, you can go higher. I couldn't have an excuse to spin a 150,000 word story in a contemporary world, even if I wanted to build it out to all of these layers of conflict and tension. So I had to think about what's a way that I can tell this story that is going to be accessible to readers. And so you probably read a lot of fantasy growing up if you're writing fantasy too, right?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. And so I think fantasy for me was the original archetype for writing a kind of cliffhanger style series or one that follows a particular story or in a romance case, like a couple or set of couples or whatever. And I think there's that genre expectation when you go into fantasy that you want a big world. You want a story that's going to consume you for hours and hours and hours. You want to have lots of layers of conflict. You want to not only know, let's say it's romantasy, that the couple or threesome or whoever it is going to fall in love and be happy, but you want to see them shape their world and the world be shaped by them and their friends and the institutions, this school. If it's an academy book, you want to see those things factor in and play on one another. And in an 80,000 word book, that's really hard to do. And so something that took me a while to realize was, oh, I need to decide up front what kind of story I want to tell. And I really love, not all of the time, but maybe 80% of the time, I love to write those stories where the romance is a focal point, but it is often a coming of age arc. There really is that arc of how the characters are influenced by their world, but then influence their world too, and being able to have the space to kind of have those ripples back and forth. So all that speaks to this structure of needing more space and being thoughtful about kind of how to punctuate that. So I think just to kind of wrap it up with cliffhangers in particular, what I think cliffhangers do are one, you're giving the reader a reason to want more from the story. You're creating attention, you're creating an unanswered question, you're giving them a new way to look at it that makes them want to come closer. But at the same time, because you're cutting off the book, you are physically requiring them to distance themselves from it. And that might be 30 seconds that it takes them to click the next book, but it's like a really big chapter break that they have to come out of your story while they're grappling with this idea of I just had this big reveal. What does it mean? Or this person is in peril. If it's that kind of book, what's going to happen next? And so I think using those thoughtfully to help create the kinds of dynamics and layers in your story that are going to make sense to the reader. That's how I have experienced cliffhangers most powerfully as a reader, I will say, and I'm trying to learn from that as an author. The one thing I will add is that we can write our best cliffhangers to get readers to come back time and time again, but the one thing we can't control is what the reader wants and their expectation. If I, as a reader, want to pick up a shorter book, I want to have resolution by the end. I don't want to kind of repeated engagement. No author's going to force me to do that. And that's just something that's the reader part of the bargain, right? And so I think creating expectations is helpful with that. It doesn't mean we have to slap labels on books and say this has a cliffhanger, but the more that you can speak to a reader and say, I'm inviting you to a bigger engagement. I'm inviting you to invest emotionally in this in a more substantive way. Whatever signals you can give, whether it's explicit in the packaging or in the blurb or the story, to just make sure that they want to come along with that ride and that they're available to you to do that emotionally. That's a major asset because I don't think that readers necessarily don't like cliffhangers. It's they don't like them if they're not prepared or ready to go along with you for that ride.
Yeah, I absolutely love your perception of the reader and author relationship. Like, there's some very nurturing words in there that I absolutely adore because it's a lot more intimate as well. And I think sometimes we really have to come back down to that because as authors, there's so much noise and just producing and making sure that all the ducks are lined in a row. And so I want to have a better understanding as to how you grew to have this knowledge, or was it trial and error, or were there resources that became available to you that you would recommend just to like keep you aligned with that throughout your journey and make sure that you're still coming back to that same principle?
I don't know of any resources specifically, but I think I've always been mindful of the fact that by putting a book in front of someone, as an author, I'm putting a book in front of you. Whatever you pay me or don't for that book, you're giving me 4, 5, 6, 7 hours of your time. That's that's the most tremendous gift that someone can give someone else. And not only time but emotional availability. As a reader, they're inviting me into their head, into their safe space, and they of course have the right to close that book whenever they want to or step away from it. They can love it or hate it, but even before that they can engage with that in a way that's right for them at that time. But I definitely try to be respectful of that and appreciative of that in all the work I do. I think because I just know that time is something that is so limited. And today, even more so than 2014 when we started, it's so fragmented. So just the idea that someone that you've never met, more than likely, is going to sit down and take 5 hours or 7 hours of their precious disposable time to invite you into their emotional space is such a privilege. And so I always try to think about how can I serve them and how can I bring something of myself to that that's going to inspire or entertain or educate or make them laugh, give them a break, whatever that is in that story. How can I give them something that will make it so that they are glad to have invested that time with me?
Yeah. So let's backpedal a little then. We are producing, we have our final product, we have our book. What is your experience like writing that book? So, are you a plotter? Are you a pantser? Do you have specific regimes that you go through to write every book, or is it different? What is your process?
So I wish I had one process. I will say I'm not a pantser. What I have learned about myself, what I am not, I'm not a pantser. I envy the people who can do that right into the dark thing. I would just wander off a cliff in the dark if I was left to my own devices. So we don't do that. But I've also found that when I plot super concretely and develop a really, crisp, sharp outline, get all my beats ready to go, that kind of sucks a bit of the joy out of it for me. So every book is a little bit different, but what I try to start from is an emotional hook. I have my characters. I don't really know them, but I know a little bit about them. I know what's most important to them. I know what they want and what they need, like GMC kind of stuff. I know I usually know a few scenes because that's what gets me excited to write a book. And that's what will keep me going during the parts where it's sticky and gross. And I don't really want to keep writing the book. And tries to keep those to a minimum because those always happen and that's part of the job. But having those moments of kind of a visceral connection, and I will write with music. I find music really helps me too. I'll do kind of one song per scene, which I really need to get better at compiling those into a playlist after because I haven't asked for that and I'm bad at doing it. But that's kind of how I write is I think a song can map onto a specific emotion or turning point, and I'll try to use that to kind of access the specific part of the book that I'm trying to get done. I will kind of chunk my book into 3 or 4 parts depending on what I'm doing and have a rough idea of what I'm writing within that and what are my really juicy scenes. But sometimes, like the book I just wrote, I wrote it out of order and I haven't done that for a long time. It definitely took me longer to piece it together after, but because I was able to start with the scenes that lit me up, I think it was more fun and I would absolutely do it that way again.
Yeah. You mentioned writing the beats. So I'm assuming that you've read Romancing the Beats. I would highly recommend that, especially for anyone who is writing romance. But it can go across any genre really, but fantastic resource. Just if you're trying to
Mhm.
get a better understanding of arcs and things like that, I think that's a fantastic book to read for writing and craft. So highly recommend. Are there any other books, or perhaps podcasts or anything like that that you would also recommend that really helped you?
Absolutely. And I think the nice thing about some of these books and tools is even if you don't map them directly onto your process, having them lurk in the back of your mind or in a folder on your computer so that you can tap into them when you need is super helpful. I would say the Save the Cat or Save the Cat Writes a Novel, any of those screenwriting books are helpful, although the media is different. John Truby's Anatomy of Story is excellent. I know a lot of people swear by the nutshell technique. That one I have a bit of trouble with, but Lisa Cron's books are also excellent. She does story coaching as well, and she talks a lot about understanding what are the incidents in a character's past that shape their GMC, and she talks about it in a way I've never heard anyone else talk about it. So I like that one a lot, and I tend to listen to podcasts more for the business and marketing side. Like Joanna Penn's, for instance, is at Creative Pen is excellent for kind of future casting stuff. I do like to get my craft more from books, probably because then I can mark them up if I need to, and I can draw on them, and I can photocopy and make my own little templates out of them, and that sort of thing.
I don't know if you do this now after writing 30 plus books, but when when the new big like when Fourth Wing and everything came out, and it makes you very excited as an author because everyone's like, this is new, it's fresh, and you're like, okay, let's read it. But then also you kind of break it apart in your mind because you're looking at those beats, you're looking at it, you're seeing the unique elements that it brings to the party. Do you do that as well?
Absolutely. And I love to do that in books. I do it with movies too. I don't know if you do. I'll do it when my husband will participate up to a point. He's a willing participant for about the first 15 minutes that I want to dissect a film. And then after that, he's out. I definitely do. And I think it's really enjoyable. I was afraid if I started to do that, it would pull me out of reading and out of watching. But it actually, in some weird ways, makes me enjoy it more because I appreciate what they've put in there to make it so good and make it something that connects with its audience. So I definitely do that.
100%. And I think it is a really good way for those who are watching as well, just reading other authors within your genre. If you're wanting to go out to a new genre, reading authors who are very well loved in that genre will usually help because you can see what the reader expectation is, why they're excited about that particular series and that particular, subgenre or whatever it may be. I do a similar thing actually when I go to the movies. It depends who I'm with. Sometimes I like to play predict the game. So when the movie starts and I'll be like, I bet it's going to end like this and this and this. And then like, no, it won't. And then it does. I'm like, how do you know this? I'm like, I've been on the block for a while. And sometimes it doesn't. And I appreciate it more because it took me, I don't do that with everybody though. It can be very annoying.
I was going to ask if you say it out loud because I absolutely do that also, and I get in so much trouble for it.
Yeah.
I get in so much trouble.
Sometimes I've learned to only be passionate around those, or limit my passion, should I say, around those who are willing to listen. Because I used to, when I first started writing, be like, and this and this and this and this happens in my book. And you could see the glaze that would happen over people's eyes. And I did that for years because I was so excited. And now that when somebody asks, oh, what's your book about? And I say, do you actually want to have this conversation? How in depth do you want to go? Because I can give you a short minute or two, or I can tell you about the entire world. What do you want? So that's an interesting lesson to learn.
I love it.
It's so good. What would you say you've been surprised from the publishing industry the most? Was there something that really caught you off guard that you weren't expecting when you started this journey?
I think there've been lots of surprises. It's mostly how the industry has shifted.
Mhm.
And again, this is from an indie perspective. I publish the vast majority of my books wide, so I get to see a bit broader cross section of the ecosystem than some folks do. So we see arguably even more change associated with that. I think it's really cool because sometimes there's a tendency as authors or as entrepreneurs to put so much weight on yourself and your responsibility to write a great book and find the right readers and all of these things right. But one thing I didn't expect at the outset was how many interesting new people, companies, creators would just emerge from the woodwork every year or couple of years that make this more of a delight
Yeah.
and that make it a more interesting, accessible ecosystem to participate in. And that's something that I really try to focus on when we hear stories of things going not author's way or certain retailers or whatever changing the rules of the game. I think there are just as many excellent examples of new, smart, creative, well-intended people that are working in this beautiful, independent and small press publishing space who really want to get great books to readers in the formats that they want, and they love to work with indie authors. So I try to focus on that, and I've made some really great partnerships and friendships along the way. And I've just learned a ton because there are some very smart people doing that work, and I'm just happy to to have a seat around some of these tables with them.
Yeah. One thing that I would always recommend is really trying to put yourself out there. So I remember when I went to my first signing, I think it was in 2014, I was 19 or 20 years old, so still very, very fresh. And I used to be quite shy. And I remember thinking, no, I want this to be, this is who I am, this is what I want to be, and I need to put myself out there and I need to talk to people. And so I started and created the mantra that everyone wants to be my friend. And that has served me so much until now. Now I have no hesitation saying hello or being friends with, people that really draw my attention. And you can, as you said, learn so much from them, but also it can create opportunity as well. And so I would like to know if you have any advice for authors if they are wanting to create some kind of opportunity or pathway, whether it be going to traditional publishing or whether it be creating audiobooks or translations or special editions, all of these things. Sometimes we just don't know where to start or who we should reach out to first. So, what advice do you have? That it's a big ball game, so the stage is yours.
I love it. It's such a huge topic, but I think an important one. And when I look back over the last 10 years for me, the first few years were, getting a few books out, figuring out a little bit more about what I wanted to write. But once I had a first series that got some traction and I had a bit that I could reinvest of both time and money, that's when I did start looking into things like translations. Translations were the first one for me that made a huge difference. Audio was much more of a slow burn. Special editions we're still looking at. But I think that for somebody who's newer, the good news, the best news is that there are a ton of ways to be successful. And and I would advise people not to let that be a frustration to them because I think sometimes we have this idea that there's one way to do it right or there's one way for me to do it right. And sometimes what that's couched in is this idea that I have to do it all right now. And if you're willing to say, I've got 5 or 10 years to get it mostly right, kind of right enough, then that opens up a ton of possibilities. Because for me, for instance, translations were a nice fit because I had a series that I knew performed really well in English in a lot of different markets. It was relatively short, the individual books, the sell through was high. I could kind of look at it and say, I don't know for sure that translation is the silver bullet, but I have a pretty good sense that this is a place to start. If something were going to work as a translation for my brand, this is where I'm going to start. This is the series that will do it. And so making those informed decisions has been a huge key to keeping me in this, to helping my brand and my business grow over time, slowly, but definitely grow pretty much every year since we started. And having that curiosity to say what is new, and then of those things that are new, what one feels good to me, feels like it might fit me, two feels doable for me, whether that's for your time, your capacity, your financial investment tolerance, your expertise. Like, what can I do? What's a chunk that I could bite off right now that would make sense to try? And then, if that works, great, you can double down on it. And if it doesn't, don't get discouraged, you try something else. And I think the more that we're willing to say, I will try four or five or 10 or 20 somethings, eventually the less we get caught up in, did this one thing work for us? And just not going all in on something. I would never, if someone calls me for advice, I would say, great, try translations, or great, try audio, but don't go and commission 20 books in a row. In that, try a few of them, try your best guess as to what you think might work, and that you feel comfortable with, and then evaluate. And when I say comfortable, I don't mean comfortable psychologically, because sometimes doing new things is real scary, but you build up a tolerance, right, after you do it a few times. And so if you say, okay, what would my I sometimes say, what would my best self do? Would the best version of me, aside from being a little bit scared, would the best version of me be excited about this opportunity? and that's what I try to go from.
Yeah. And I definitely think it pays to say as well, just make sure you're double reading over everything. Like there are so many opportunities. We can do a lot of things ourselves now. And as you said, that takes time and money. Or you can contract with those who already have a team, and that's fantastic. Just double check the fine print. Don't think just because an opportunity has been presented to you that you must take it and it's going to be the thing that explodes everything. It might do. And I'm really excited and I hope that's the case. But sometimes as well, we just need to double check because I know for me, there's been many, many, many opportunities that I took and it didn't pan out. And sometimes it wasn't the greatest experience. So just be cautious, ask friends, ask around. There's plenty of groups, and just find your people and just double check sometimes. As I say, safety first.
Absolutely. That's a big one, right? Because I think now more than ever, there are just as there are wonderful actors, there are some people that would take advantage of new authors or people who don't maybe quite have a handle on exactly what they're looking for. And I would say that anytime we're making decisions from that kind of scarcity energy, whenever you feel like, oh shoot, I have to do this because now is the only time that this will work for me, just take a breath and check yourself and say it's probably not. If this is the right opportunity, it might come back again, or I can sleep on it for a few nights, or I can chat with some friends. Nothing is urgent. I saw in a Facebook group today, and I love this. It says nothing in book publishing is an emergency.
And I think it's important as well, check credibility too. One thing that I always ask or I try and find on the website is who have you worked with before? Who are the authors that you have experience with? Because then that way you can go and do your own research and see what that outcome looks like. There's actually been situations where I've reached out to particular authors, whether I know them at the time or not, and just asking, hey, I see that you have, worked with such and such. What was your experience? Sometimes they'll respond and sometimes they don't, but I think it's good to get that, direct approach as well. So don't be scared to do that. As long as, of course, you're not asking the author, like, hey, my name's such and such, and I want this from you. That's a little bit more abrasive, but yeah, I think that's also a great thing to do as well. I really want to talk about what you have found that's worked for you marketing wise, because marketing is just as difficult, if not more, than writing the book. So, what are three things that you would recommend for authors to really focus on, whether it be newsletter or ads or social media? What are the things that have worked for you?
What's worked for me, the short answer is doing a few things that I enjoy doing. So it's probably not the same for everybody. I have an ARC team that has been with me, many of them for 10 years. I have a few people that I tapped on the shoulder on Goodreads as strangers on the first book, and they, bless them, have stayed with me through 35 books. And I've seen their children go from school age to college, and it's just wild, and I'm so grateful for them being part of this with me for all that time. But I think having that baseline, so that if you go to release a book, you have both that immediate feedback from people, ideally a week or two before the book goes up, just to check and make sure, like, yes, this is hitting the mark. Yes, it's doing all of the brand things that the readers expect from you. My ARC team's really good at holding me accountable to my brand promise. Um, and then also being able to give some of that initial credibility of going on the retailers and leaving some honest reviews, just so that when somebody who doesn't know you goes and finds you on a retailer page, they don't feel like they're the first person who's ever seen this book. So that ARC team for me is a non-negotiable. It's just something that we've built the systems over the years to do. I used to run it. I have someone wonderful who works for me and manages the day to day of that now. But that's you can pry my ARC team from my cold dead hands. Aside from that, ads depend on the book. Definitely, if it's a first in series, I will do ads. I don't always do them immediately. It depends on what my kind of goals are for the year and what the flow is of what's coming out. Usually, I'll have kind of an ad budget total of what I have in mind, and then I will split that out with what my releases are and what my catalog pushes are and things like that. But definitely, I'd say if you're earlier in terms of how many books you have out, planning to do even some modest ads can be helpful because it also gives you that feedback of what do people who don't know me think of this? What do they think of the packaging? How are they reacting to what I'm presenting to the world in this cover, this description, and then eventually the book if they go on to buy it. So I think we can learn a lot from even, $3 a day in advertising, just getting new eyeballs on a book. Aside from that, for me personally, I do a lot of catalog advertising, which is not a new release strategy, but again, I need someone to just tell me how to sell a book before I've sold a book because I don't know how to do that yet, right? So for me, it's kind of like having a book out there for 6 months or a year. I start to understand what it is to readers, and then I can invest in it
Yeah.
because then I know who to target and what they're getting out of it and how does it fit with the rest of my catalog. And then you can start to kind of play with some of those other levers if you want to. You don't have to, but with you know first free promos or book bubs or all of those things that are available to you when it's the right time to do that. So those are the things that I mainly focus on. And newsletters, so I would say two newsletter swaps have been super helpful with other authors. Comparable authors, don't be in a rush to say, oh, I just want to do a newsletter swap with whoever has a really big email list. Just find people who are like-minded, who produce similar books, whose readers are likely to enjoy your books and vice versa, and that will get you a lot further.
Absolutely. Let's talk about then new releases. Tell us everything that we need to know about rookie season. Comes out November 4th. So, what do we need to know and where do we find it?
Yeah, so rookie season is, I will say this is my first holiday book. It is a sports romance. It's a one night stand, snowed in holiday book set in my Denver Kodiak's professional basketball world. I am the last person in the whole universe to write a holiday book. I did not realize until I went to do this how many people write these. And I just got to the point, usually when I get around to thinking about holiday books, I've kind of scheduled my year on what I want to write. But last year, it was really cold here all the way through February into March. We had so much snow, I couldn't even shovel it anywhere. Our snowbanks were like 6 feet high. And I thought, okay, I can either lament the fact that it's not spring and I have nowhere to shovel my snow anymore, or I can just crank the Christmas music and just go back in time a couple months and put myself back in that holiday vibe and write a holiday book. And it was such a joy to do. So this book is in my Kodiak's world. It's a new couple, but I would call it a robust novella length. I think it's about 40,000 words. There's enough there to sink your teeth into. New couple, but other characters and POVs that already exist in the world in the other seven books. It's super tropey and fun, and it's just such a cozy vibe. It makes me look forward to winter, and I'm not even ready for it yet.
I'm so excited for this release and not long now either. So, congratulations on writing your first
Thank
holiday
you. I
romance.
appreciate. I know. I don't think it will be my last. I think I started something now. I might just write holiday romances. So 2 years from now, it might be all that I produce. So we'll find out.
I have had so much fun having you on. Thank you so much for taking the time. And let us know, where do we find you? What social medias are the best place to find you? Obviously, definitely join your newsletter, but yeah, where do we need to be in the know?
Of course, my website is piperlawsonbooks.com and my bookstore is piperlawsonbookstore.com. Both of those you can get a reading list and my email sign up. That's the best place to get a hold of me. I am also on social media, Piper Lawson Books on Instagram and Facebook, and those are the best places.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, who knows? Watch your space. We might get you back on in a few years and see if you have only been producing holiday romances. But thank you so much. And until next episode, guys, have a good one.
Bye. Thanks, Kaya.